Hi, my name is Annotation. Rizal's annotation of Antonio Morga's Sausages de las Islas, Filipinas. Dr. Antonio de Morga, he was a soldier and a lawyer, an explosive combination, especially if one was also a high-ranking colonial bureaucrat. Antonio de Morga Sanchez Garri was born in 1559 in Sevilla, Spain. 38 years after Magellan was killed by Lapu-Lapu and his men for meddling in the internal affairs of the Rajas and Tatus of Cebu. During the most productive 40 years of his life, Morga was sent to the most significant outpost of the Spanish Overseas Empire. He served the Viceroyalty of Nueva Hispania, the Viceroyalty of Peru, and across the Pacific at the gateway to Asia, the Captaincy General of the Philippines. In the Philippine colony, Dr. de Morga was for some order, that is, a judge of the Royal Audiencia, the appellate court, which also kept an eye on the government general and the colony coffers. In 1609, his book Sausages de las Islas Filipinas was published in Mexico, where he returned after a polemical term of office in the Philippines. Conditions of the place when it was created. In 1890, in Paris, the book was published in this title, Sausages de las Islas Filipinas, Paul el Dr. Antonio de Morga, of República en México, el año de 1609. Nuevamente sacada a los Y, anotada por José Rizal, published in Mexico in 1609, brought the light once again and annotated by Jose Rizal. The title page also mentioned in prologue by Professor Fernando Blumentritt. Rizal dedicated his annotated Morga a los Filipinos to all of us. He said that in the Nolimitang hearing, he began to depict at the actual state of our country and the effect that the novel had made him realize that before continuing the Noli narrative, he had to delve into our past to better judge the present and to measure the path we have taken during the past 3 centuries. Rizal admitted that he grew up without knowing much about yesterday like most Filipinos. He could not write with authority about things he never saw nor studied, so he was compelled to invoke the testimonies of an illustrious Spaniard who ruled the destiny of the Philippines at the start of its new era and who witnessed the last moment of our ancient nationality. Morga's book shows the shadow of the civilization of our forebears, and he, Rizal, faithfully transmits the words of Morga, editing only the punctuation of the original, modernizing the spelling for essay reading. After praising how good-looking, well-built, friendly, and hospitable the natives were, after describing how exciting they were when cheap giveaways were distributed among them, the Adelantado accused them for stealing things from the book and started to drive them ashore. The natives were confused, started to throw stones at the Spaniard, so latter shot the native with their arquebuses, killing about 5 or 6 of them. Rizal's wrote that has always been the first sign of European civilization as it presented itself in the Pacific, and God willing, It will note the last sign, but judging from statistics, the Pacific Islands that were civilized because terribly depopulated. The first death of Magellan himself when he arrived at the Marianas was so burned more than 40 houses, civils, and killing 7 inhabitants for stealing one of their small boats. The natives saw nothing wrong with that, like civilized ones find nothing wrong in fishing, hunting, and subjugating people who are weaker and purely armed.
I'm Abu Jarin Hassan Mahamud. Content analysis. Analysis of the important historical information found in the document. Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. The book Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, an account of Spanish observation about the Filipinos and the Philippines. What is Islas Filipinas? The Philippines was named in honor of King Philip II of Spain. What is sucesos? Events, happening, occurrence. The success is the work of an honest observer, a versatile bureaucrat who knew the workings of the administration from the inside. Rizal objectives. Rizal objectives to awaken the consciousness of the Filipino regarding their glorious ways of the past, to correct what has been distorted about the Philippines due to Spanish conquest, to prove that Filipinos are civilized even before the coming of the Spaniard. Blumeritz is influence on Rizal. Ferdinand Blumeritz has encouraged Rizal to write about the Philippines colonial history. On Rizal Annotation, the first objective, the early Filipinos' pride, Rizal strove to establish that the Filipinos could be proud of their pre-conquest past. On Rizal Annotation, the second objectives, history and a propaganda weapon, Rizal aimed to use history as propaganda weapon. Early government. Our forefathers in the pre-colonial Philippines already possessed a working judicial and legislative system. High literacy rate. The Spanish missionaries exploited the baybayin for their own ends, learning and using it to translate their goals. Early artillery. Our ancestors were very proficient in the art of war. Aside from wielding sword and spears, they also knew how to make and fire guns and cannons. Smooth foreign relations. The pre-colonial Filipinos has already established trading and diplomatic relations with countries as far away as the Middle East. Self-sufficient. In terms of food, our forefathers did not suffer from any lack thereof. Blessed with such a resource-rich country, they had enough for themselves and their families. Advanced civilization, our ancestors possessed a complex working society and a culture replete with works of arts and literature. Important points. Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas is the first book to tackle the Philippine history. The book discussed the political, social, and economical aspect of colonizer as the colonized country. The book that described the event and the outside of the country from 1493 to 1603, including the history of the Philippines. The pre-colonial Philippines already possessed a working judicial and legislative system. Spanish missionaries put an end of the baybayin written system of the Philippines to translate their goals. Our ancestors possessed a complex society, culture filled with arts and literature. Result three positions. The people of the Philippines have a culture on their own before the coming of the Spaniard. Filipinos were decimated, demoralized, exploited, and ruined by the Spanish colonization. The present state of the Philippines was not necessarily superior to its past. Jose Rizal as Philippine national hero. Rizal gave us freedom by using goodness. Jose Rizal became the Philippines national hero because he fought for freedom in a silent but powerful way. He expressed his love for the Philippines through his novels, essays, and articles rather than through the use of force or aggressions.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. I'm Golsarti Usman of Group 4, and I'm going to discuss about the results annotation of Antonio Morga's Sucesos de las Islas, Filipinas. The question is, how did this change the course of history and its important relevance and contribution to the Philippines? So, first, who is Antonio Morgas? Antonio Morga is a Spanish lawyer and a government official during the 17th century, a historical anthropologist, and the author of Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. Wrote the first lay formal of the Philippine conquest by Spain. So, Antonio Morga is the author of Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, and the book narrates that history of war, intrigues, diplomacy, and the evangelization of the Philippines. So, however, modern historian, including Rizal himself, noted that Morga has a definite bias and would often distort facts or even rely on invention to fit his defense of Spanish conquest, meaning there are events that he reconsidered writing it in the book, like how cruel the Spaniard toward Filipinos, how racist they are, how they treat Filipinos, and how biased they are, and what kind of government they have. And he even writes in his book that those native living in Luzon are tribe whom one cannot be safe with because to pacify them it is either through good or violence. What Antonio Morga is trying to point out to other people is that the Filipino is more prone to violence than taking things in a peaceful way. Also, he's trying to make every nation see that they were the one being oppressed by the Filipino, which is wrong and very far from the truth. When you think about it, when Spain came to the Philippines, they brought ship, weapons like guns, swords, and body armor, while Filipino have only bahag, turban, ebolo, the one they used to cut meat, a spear used for fishing, and archer used for hunting meat. No, that's why it does not make sense. That's why Rizal chose to annotate Morga's book, because he's trying to cover up this cruelty of Spain against Filipino people. So the important contribution of Rizal annotation of Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas is that it is an eye-opener to a Filipino and to those who read the Antonio Morga's book. And his annotation included clarification and implication of details, and it also enlightened those who read the book of Antonio Morgas. And relevance, when Rizal published his annotation of Antonio Morga's Sucesos in 1890, he had already traveled in parts of Spain, France, Germany, Slovakia, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, China, Hong Kong, Japan, the United States, and England. He could converse in Spanish, French, German, Italian, Japanese, and English. He was only 29 years old. That's why it's no big deal for Jose Rizal to annotate the book of Antonio Morgas, even though it is written in Spanish form, because he can translate and he can understand plenty of language like Spanish. Rizal's intent was not only to provide the Filipino people their early history, a pre-Spanish history, but to present to them their own authentic culture and identity.